NASDAQ. And one of the avenues there, Jamaica utility companies or private companies that have growing revenues, you're able to access pools of capital in the United States by going public directly on in New York, and we're one of those agents for that. And so there's a lot of opportunity for capital formation and partnering. And one of the things we do is just that. We have a business called ClearList, and you can find it easily on doing an internet search. And we just do that. We take private companies that are looking for capital, and we source parts of companies so that you can get investment from family offices here in the United States. And those family offices have net worths greater than several $100 billion. So there's a lot of opportunity, I think, to grow capital. And so I think for our plans here in Jamaica is just that, is to partner to be a business-to-business, a conduit for liquidity. We're looking to launch ETFs in Jamaica. I talked about this last year. We're looking for opportunities for managers who would like to launch an ETF in Jamaica and have those discussions. And we need more Jamaican companies to launch in Jamaica to grow index so that the ETF can be launched there. And anyone who has those ideas, I would love to have that discussion with you. I've had several discussions over the last years. We just haven't had the opportunity to launch one yet, but we'd love to do that for the country. And I think largely our plans here is to bring liquidity and to help bring efficiency to the companies that are listed on Jamaican Stock Exchange, and to be a market maker here. That's largely what our interest is. And so if you look at it holistically, what we do, all things that are related to market trading, we do. I know that there is an emerging crypto platform in Jamaica that we are interested in having a conversation with. And as crypto grows and regulation, I think Jamaica is one of the leaders in providing a regulatory framework around digital coins and crypto trading. And as that evolves, the regulatory framework, we would grow our interest in that area. So it's an emerging area. I think we can saw what happened to the crypto markets over the last couple of days. That's what markets do. They grow and contract. And, as interest rates rise in the United States, and because of inflation, there is a rotation around risk assets, and crypto is just one of them. And I think it's just seasonality and temporary around just how to think about that risk asset in aggregate. So that is what we're looking to do. I think largely the way to think about GTS is your partner in all things financial instruments that trade on exchanges in the Caribbean, and then using our great resources around our financial prowess to provide liquidity is how to think of us as your partner going forward inside of the country. Next up. So with that, it's a very brief conversation. I know that, following after His Excellency from Japan, I like to be more thoughtful and to take questions if anyone has any questions. So back to Jamila.
Thank you, Jamila. Thank you, Reginald.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. Well, the first thing I would like to ask, especially for retail investors listening, how is an ETF really different from, say, a unit trust or a listed equity fund? And what's the benefit of, say, investing in an ETF versus those?
That's a great question. A lot of it is around costs, and then an ability to enter and exit the market efficiently. And so we look at unit investment trust, and you look at separate accounts. Unit investment trusts typically have higher fees, and they also trade at steeper premium or discounts to its worth. And so ETFs provide an efficient vehicle that investors can get exposure to, but yet the costs are very competitive and compared to other types of vehicles. A lot of times in the United States, investors will use mutual funds And the issue with mutual funds is that they're not very tax efficient. And I think when you talk about the tax efficiency, particularly from a U.S. standpoint and how ETFs are being used, let's say a manager or a family office or some other vehicle that had a great amount of assets with a lot of capital gains. There are mechanisms actually where you can take a portfolio that has a lot of capital gains, transfer them into an ETF using a special process, and you get to pass along the capital gains in a very tax efficient manner, actually tax free from a U.S. standpoint, and then take hold of an ETF at a new cost basis. And from a U.S. standpoint, you get to mitigate tax exposure through this process using ETFs. So, for example, let me say that in a different way. Let's say if a family office or a corporation had a marketable security portfolio that had sizable tax gains, and you wanted to mitigate your tax exposure, you can move the securities of that portfolio into an ETF using a special mechanism and not pay the capital gains tax by selling that portfolio in a different way. And that's how ETFs are being used. And so there are many different formats, but from a retail investor who's looking to save money for retirement, opening up a local brokerage account and then buying securities and also ETFs, invariably with our relationship with Jamaica Stock Exchange, that order flow would come to GTS, and that you have great efficiency in getting exposure to global markets to Jamaica.
Thank you. Jimmy, we have a question.
Okay, thank you. So I know that the ETFs, they usually track various assets or sectors, etc. What's the decision making behind the type of assets or sectors that your ETFs would track? And for the ones that we possibly have access to, which assets do those track?
Well, from a U.S. standpoint, ETFs cover every asset you can think of that is tradable. So we don't have an ETF on farmland. We don't have an ETF on crypto spot, but crypto futures we do. So Bitcoin future ETFs, we have them, but not crypto digital currency spot just yet. So any marketable instrument, there is an ETF for it. And so we think about it this way. ETFs have allowed for democratization of retail investors to get exposure into difficult asset classes. So call it 10 years ago, it was very difficult to buy gold bars and very expensive to do that. We launched an ETF in the United States that gave exposure to gold, and we cut the access costs, and then now you can buy spot gold using an ETF. And then that is just a demonstration that it's easy just to say, I want to have exposure to gold, and you go buy GLD or IAU, which is the ticker in the United States, for spot gold, and you're buying representative ounces through an ETF. And that's the benefit. A retail investor can easily buy commodities. So right now we're in an inflationary period where the marketplace has demonstrated it's probably better to have commodity-based products in your portfolio. So, think of raw commodities, gold, and then, largely how the marketplace is thinking, owning stocks that provide dividends provides a measure of inflation protection. And real estate REITs, they've also it's been pretty impactful seeing the flows into that marketplace. So anything that there is an asset class, you can probably find an ETF for it listed somewhere around the world. And I would like to say that the ETF community is nearing 10 trillion in assets, and it's growing at a 25% growth rate per year. And a lot of the pressures that mutual fund or asset managers are feeling is through competition, through price, and that benefits retail investors by bringing the cost of these investments down through competition, and that just benefits Jamaican households.
Jamilia?
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm going to open up the floor to any questions, whether in the chat or there on the floor.
Yes, thank you, Jamila. Reginald, can you hear me?
I certainly can, sir.
Wonderful. Question for you. The Jamaica Stock Exchange has a direct market access platform which will allow investors to directly invest through their broker into the foreign exchanges, into
That's, that's correct.
the foreign markets. How
That's
do you
correct.
think that, what kind of an effect do you think that will have on the volume of activity and the growth potential for local portfolios? One, and the second question, because we only have 5 minutes, I'm going to put them both together. Companies that are diaspora based that are in the United States, if they want to come to us in Jamaica to raise capital, what is your role? I just wanted to give us the 1, 2, 3 so that any such person listening will know what exactly they have to do through you to get to us.
Yeah, absolutely. So through the innovation of Jamaica Stock Exchange, how the direct market access works is that the local brokerage companies in Jamaica can access the Jamaican Stock Exchange and through GTS get the liquidity into the United States at a very cost-efficient way. And before that was authored, it had to go to Canada in order to get to the United States. So this is directly in the U.S. So this is a benefit. And so what I'm advocating for retail investors from Jamaica, if you don't have a local brokerage account, partner with local brokerage and begin a savings account and invest that into the stock market locally and then globally. That is the benefit. And when I look at Jamaican households, when I look at nearly 90% are not participating in the growth of wealth, there's an opportunity for retail investors to grow their net worth by participating in global markets. And we've seen over the last 10 years where the markets have nearly tripled that if you're not participating, you're not growing, you're not getting richer. So that's the opportunity set. For a company who would like to list on the Jamaica Stock Exchange, generally there are local listing rules. And for companies that need greater liquidity, as a market maker, I'm willing to provide that liquidity here in Jamaica, but also in the United States. So if a Jamaica company is listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange but wants to raise capital in the United States, they can remain listed in Jamaica and then launch an ADR, American Depository Receipt, and have a representative stock trade in the United States in tandem with its listing in Jamaica. And we would be the market maker for that in the United States and then providing liquidity here in Jamaica at the same time. And that's the benefit. I think there's a lot of opportunities to grow that and then to grow the education. So I'm taking meetings, and anyone who would like to know more, I have a local representative. His name is Earl Chapman, and then he can access my services by talking to this gentleman here and arranging meetings. And when I'm in Jamaica, happy to make those meetings as well. My office I have global offices and a largely split in New York, but happy to come and present in greater detail what the opportunities are for companies to grow capital directly.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. I think that we're out of time, but I just want to thank you for sharing. I know that the investors are excited about the prospects of having access to ETFs, and companies are excited about the prospects of getting access to more liquidity for growth. So thank you once more for sharing, and I'll turn over back to Andrew.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jamelia. Excellent session. Well moderated. And thank you, Reginald, for reminding us and our audience of the many opportunities that exist for partnership between us. Our next session will speak to the strategic use of intangible assets for companies on the Jamaica Stock Exchange. And I will invite Mr. Nigel Cooper, Head of school, Joan Duncan School of Entrepreneurship, Ethics, and Leadership, College of Business and Management, University of Technology, to join us. Welcome, Nigel.
Thank you. And I think it's good afternoon now. Just made it the afternoon session. Thank you. All protocols observed. Thank you for the opportunity. I want to share briefly, I know time is very tight, and there's a presentation that the team has in terms of this whole thing about intangible assets, because the game has changed dramatically even in the last 12 months globally with intangible assets. So one look at the overview that I'm going to be doing. We're going to look at a quick definition of intangible assets, just to make sure everybody online, etc., understands. We'll look at a global snapshot of what is happening with intangible assets. We'll look at some research conducted on about 70 companies on the JSE, right? So it's coming home. And then out of those, that research, we'll look at the results, from the main market and the junior market. And then we're going to come home with the strategic use, how to improve the use of intangible assets. So we have the definition of the intangible assets. I don't have a clicker. I wasn't given a mover, so thanks. The definition of intangible assets, there are several, but we would use the international accounting standards in terms of it being an identifiable non-monetary assets without physical substance as assets, and assets that's controlled by an entity as a result of past events for the purpose of self-creation. Okay, I get in the clicker now, which will be a great. So we took in the international accounting standards definition that looks at the definition of intangible assets. And there are three main criteria